Hello, I'm Michelle from Ascent Bath & Body, here in collaboration with Cosy and welcome to another soap making video. In this second video we're going to make soap again, and we're going to make it from pre-manufactured soap base like we did last time. But this time we're going to ramp it up a little bit and we're going to add some colour. We're going to use a mica powder and we're going to add another additional ingredient as well. So let's get started.
Okay, so here is everything that we need to make this particular soap. The first item is obviously our soap base, and again this comes in a 1 kilogram tub, and for this project we're going to use a clear soap base. Because we're going to add colour to this soap and we want the colour to pop, we're going to use the clear. If you add colour to the white base you'll find that you get some lovely pastel shades, but because we're going to use gold this time we're going to go for clear so the colour pops. Then we've got some shea butter which we're going to add in, and this is really great for skin. It's great to add into soap. It's got really lovely conditioning and moisturising properties for skin. Then we've got our soap mould, and this time we're using this rectangular soap mould with the rounded edges. I really love the shape of this mould because I've got really quite tiny hands. I sometimes find soap quite difficult to hold, so these shapes are perfect if you've got small hands like me. Then I've got a sharp knife for cutting the soap base, a spatula for stirring, I've got my chopping board for chopping the soap base onto, my thermometer, my scales, my melting pot. I have my rubbing alcohol to get rid of any bubbles in the finished soap and to mix our mica in, and I've got a little beaker for mixing the mica, a spoon for getting the shea butter out of the tub, and then I've got this fragrance oil, and for this one I've chosen Baltic Amber and Clove, again available from Cosy Owl, and this is a really lovely scent for autumn. It's a really kind of subtle, relaxing, vanilla-y, ambery kind of fragrance. The clove's not very strong in it, so if you don't like clove, that's great. It's a really lovely fragrance and it goes really well with the gold, I think, as well. And then the colour, we're going to use gold mica powder, so we're going to have a nice shimmery gold looking soap, and I'm going to show you how to mix that into the base. I've also got my double boiler, and as you can see I'm also wearing gloves. So the first thing to do is to get our soap base out of the tub, and as before we just need to pop it upside down and press down. It should just pop out quite easily. So as I explained in the last video, it's always a good idea to chop your soap base down into small chunks. It's much easier to manage, it melts down much more evenly and much quicker. So just be careful when you're using the knife chopping into the small cubes, but pieces about this size are about perfect. So I'm going to put my pot on the scale and tar it to 0, and I'm going to aim to make approximately 4 soaps this time. I haven't actually measured how much each cavity on the mould takes, but I would estimate, looking at it, it'd be about 90 grams. So I'm going to go for about 400 grams of soap base just to make sure that I've got enough base to make 4 soaps. Okay, nearly there, so just one more tiny piece, and 401 is good enough. So we'll pop the jug in the water to get that to start to melt down, and I'll just turn my temperature up a little bit. Okay, so just to recap on heating, I did go over this quite a lot in the last video, so you can always refer back to that one if you're not sure. But generally this kind of soap base starts to melt at around 60 degrees, and that's Celsius, because I know a couple of people were asking on the last video whether that was Celsius or Fahrenheit. Well, these temperatures are in Celsius. So it starts melting around 60. Try not to take it above 75 if you can, because that's when the soap base will start to scorch. So heat no higher than 75 and try to keep it round about 70 if you can. Now you can melt this down in a microwave, as I explained last time, and that needs to be done in short 20 to 30 second bursts. Now if you haven't got a thermometer, then just make sure that you take your soap base off the heat, just when you've got a few little chunks left in the bottom, and then you know you haven't overheated your soap base. Okay, so while I'm waiting for that to melt down, I'm just going to talk to you about the shea butter that we're going to add. Now, soap base is a great product in itself and it works really well. It makes a great soap, but you can make it even better by just putting 1 or 2 extra ingredients in. And today I'm going to put some shea butter in. Shea butter is absolutely lovely for skin. It has conditioning properties, moisturising properties, and that's due to the fatty acid contents. Now, the amount that you need to add is quite small, because if you add too much you'll affect the lathering properties of your soap and it won't bubble up so much. So generally we're looking at between 1 and 2%. So I've got 400 grams of soap base, so I'm going to go for about 6 grams of shea butter for this recipe. So I'm just going to scoop it out and pop it on the scale. Okay, so we've got 6 there, so I'm just going to pop that in. You can melt it all down together right from the start, but I just did it separately just to show you and just to talk to you a little bit about the shea butter. So that just goes in with the base and it just melts down with the soap base. Okay, I'm just going to go in and check the soap base and just see how it's doing. Sometimes it does clump together in the bottom, so you might just need to move it around a little bit, but try not to stir it too much because you will introduce quite a lot of bubbles into it, so just be careful. Okay, so I'm just going to have another look, and I can see it's nearly melted, but we've just got a few tiny little pieces left at the bottom. So I'm just going to see what the temperature is to check that we're not overheating, and we're at 64.2, so we're absolutely fine. So I'm just going to check that it's not clumping together at the bottom. Now, if you were using a microwave or you didn't have a thermometer, now would probably be a good time to turn the heat off. Keep the jug in the water, but just tin the heat off so you're not going to overheat. But just keep the jug in the water so that it carries on melting down. Okay, so while I'm just waiting for those last couple of pieces to melt down, I'm just going to talk to you about adding mica into your soap. Now, you can add mica directly into your soap base, and if you do that, you just need to keep stirring it really well, and sometimes you still can get little pockets of mica that don't disperse properly. So I'm just going to show you a different method of adding the mica, which makes sure it does disperse properly and it's all nice and even. Now, I just use a little beaker, and I use a little lollipop stick just to stir. So I'm just going to open the packet of mica, and for this amount of soap I'm probably going to do maybe 3 little spoonfuls of mica, which should give us a decent amount of colour. So I'm just going to measure that into my little glass beaker. You don't have to use one of these glass beakers, this is like a little baking one that I've got, but any kind of cup or anything will do to mix it in. And then what we do is we create a paste with the rubbing alcohol, and we spray that in, and just start to mix it around until it all mixes together, and we're just looking for a kind of thick paste which will be sufficient to add it into the soap so it disperses properly. Don't worry about the smell of the rubbing alcohol, because remember from last time, this does evaporate, so you won't be able to smell it in your final soap. So we just keep mixing until it's a nice smooth paste, and then we know it's ready to add into the soap. So I'm thinking that the soap base is probably ready to come off now, so I'm just going to give it a little stir just to check. I'm going to turn the heat off and just give it just a couple of minutes, just stirring around. And then I'm going to remove it from the heat, making sure there's no tiny little lumps left at the bottom. And then I'm going to add my mica paste into the soap. You can do this at any temperature, you don't have to wait for your soap base to cool down for this stage. This isn't like fragrance, you can add it at any stage. In fact, to be honest, probably better to add it sooner rather than later, because you'll find it disperses better if the soap base is slightly hotter. So as you can see, it's gone in really smoothly, and we just need to just stir it for a minute or so just to make sure it's all combined. So I'm now going to see what temperature we're at, and we're at 64.6. Now, if you remember from last time in the last video, we need to add fragrance, well, optimum temperature to add fragrance is about 60 degrees, so we just need to keep stirring this just for another minute or two, just to try and bring the temperature down slightly. Okay, so I'm going to check the temperature again now, and we're at 61.1, so I think we can probably add fragrance now, because it will carry on cooling. So if you remember from last time, rule of thumb for adding fragrance is around 2%, but please check the IFRA statement on Cosy Owl's website and also the flash point. If it says any more than 2%, add 2%, that's about right. If it's any less than 2%, then you have to go with whatever the restricted amount is. So we're going to add the fragrance oil directly into the soap base, and because we're adding at 2% and we had 400 grams of soap base, we're going to be adding 8 grams of fragrance oil. So we can pour that straight in, and I've just gone over slightly, 1 to 9. And you need to give that a really good stir. I like to stir it for at least 20 to 30 seconds to make sure that the fragrance is fully dispersed through the soap and we don't have any little pockets of fragrance. So that should be all combined now. So now we're going to pour into our soap mould, and look how gorgeous this gold looks, how swirly the mica makes it. It really is a really nice way to colour soap by using mica. So I'm just going to fill each one of these cavities, and I'm going to see if my measurements are right, and my guess of 90 grams per cavity is right. And it's looking like I'm a bit out. I think there may have been 70 because I've got quite a bit of soap base left, so I'm going to try and get a 5th one poured. Nearly, just about enough to make a 5th bar. So once that's poured, we've got all these these bubbles on the surface. So again, we use our rubbing alcohol and we spray across the surface of the soap, and you'll pop all those bubbles. So that's done now. So because again we've got a cavity mould, I like to leave these for at least 45 minutes until they're fully set and they're cold to the touch before we pop them out. So we'll come back shortly when these are set and we'll remove them from the mould. Okay, so these have been setting for about 45 to 50 minutes and they're all hard to the touch and they're cool now, so we can pop them out of the mould. So we just pull the mould away from the soap and the soap pops out really easily. Okay, so that's our 5 soaps, and I absolutely love the shape of these soaps, and the gold's really shimmery and it gives a really nice effect. They're also really easy to hold in your hand. I really love these shape of soaps. So there's our gold mica soaps, fragrance with Baltic, amber and clove.